Hey everybody, I just want to share with you something really exciting that happened this last Wednesday. Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida, signed Bill HB 621. Now, for all of you who don't know what that bill states, because you don't live in Florida or haven't seen the news lately, this bill specifically is in order to help homeowners be able to get squatters out of their property quickly. And this is a huge win for homeowners and also landlords. And in today's video, I'm going to go deeper into what the specific law says and what it doesn't say. But first, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you just take a second to go down and subscribe to my channel so I can provide you some awesome content about real estate investing and things that affect real estate investors.
You assume in America, if you purchase a home and own a residence, that's your residence. That if you happen to maybe split time in Orlando and Michigan, that if you go to Michigan over the summer, people aren't going to be able to just move into your house and then claim squatters' rights on your private residence. In fact, we have seen squatters move in and claim residence. This forces a massive, long, drawn-out judicial review before they can even be removed from the property. These are people that never had a right to be in the property to begin with. Earlier this month in New York, a woman returned to a property she inherited to find squatters living there. She changed the locks to get them out, and the state of New York arrested her instead of the squatters. Just a few days ago, two squatters in New York City allegedly murdered the property owner when she confronted them for being in her apartment illegally. In fact, we even have illegal aliens taking to social media instructing other foreigners how to come into this country and commandeer property.
In his most recent controversial TikTok video, Moreno is telling his followers to avoid living on the streets in the United States. They can, quote, invade empty homes and live there, saying under U.S. law, if a house is uninhabited, it can be seized, referring to squatting rights in our country.
Well, today in the state of Florida, we say very simply, you are not going to be able to commandeer somebody's private property and expect to get away with it. We are in the state of Florida ending the squatter scam once and for all. Momentarily, I'll be signing HB 621, which will give the homeowner the ability to quickly and legally remove a squatter from a property, and which will increase criminal penalties for squatting. This idea of squatting, when you had the Old West and people would settle the West, you'd show up, there'd be a place, so people would settle. They'd create a community. Well, to have someone come 7, 8 years later and say they own the property after all this, you understood why that was done in that way. That was never intended to empower somebody to just invade some residential subdivision and illegally occupy somebody's private residence. So what we're doing today is recognizing that, but I think more importantly, providing very swift remedies, because what the squatters know is even when they're in the wrong, it's a massive process many times before they can be evicted, and a lot of times the process is very expensive.
Now, I recently posted a short video on the same topic, and I got a lot of comments, and some of the things that were said were squatters should have never had rights to begin with. And whereas I think that there's a lot of truth to that, let me explain a little bit about what I found in my research about what squatters' rights are all about. So squatters' rights aren't just things that are found here in the United States. In fact, squatters' rights are things that are found in a lot of areas all throughout the world. And so there's a long history of what squatters' rights are. And let me explain a little bit about kind of how that came about. Imagine England, where you had a landlord or a lord of the land. And in order to be on that land and till that land, you needed to pay the lord of the land rental in order to be there. And you would build your own house and all of those things. And it was kind of like what we pay now as property taxes. And so people would think, it's too expensive to farm on this land. Let's move our family somewhere else. And so they would leave that land and they would go find some place somewhere, and they would start to set up a residence there. They would, build a home. They would start to till the land and do all of these things. And let's say they were there for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And then all of a sudden somebody came and said, hey, by the way, you're on my land. You need to leave. they're like, well, what do you mean? I mean, I have my house here, my family, my children have married, they have houses here. We built this town, and what do you mean we have to leave? And so the person who owns the land decides, you know what, you're on my land, therefore I'm going to kill you. And then they decide to go and shoot everybody or stab everybody or whatever because the person is on their land. In order to protect people from people just going and taking the law into their own hands and saying, you're on my land, therefore I'm going to forcibly remove you. Because again, what if it's determined that that person actually should be able to be on the land? Or imagine this, you're looking for a place to rent and you go and you find this place to rent. You're like, oh, this is fantastic. It's within my budget. You reach out and you make connection with what you think is the property manager. And they say, okay, great. Well, you can go ahead and move into the property and, let's go ahead and get you a lease. And so you get the lease signed and everything signed, you move in. And then 2 or 3 days later, somebody shows up saying, what are you doing in my house? This is my house and you need to leave. And you're like, well, what are you talking about? I have a rental agreement and we've already paid, first month's rent and the deposit. Why are you here? And so let's say I am an innocent person renting a place that I think is available to rent, but the person that I contacted because they put up the listing on, some sort of website that I found and thought, oh, this is great, whether it was Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever, but I find this place and then I go and I move in all my stuff, I pay them rent in order to be there, and then I find out that it actually isn't their place. But let's say during that process of me trying to find out, the person gets really upset that I'm in their house, and so they turn to violence in order to take me and my family out of their house. So in order to make this whole situation more peaceful, rather than somebody being able to just go and physically or even violently remove somebody from their home, the law has determined, let's go ahead and allow for law enforcement that are trained to remove somebody from the home. Let's allow them to do it. And we will figure out through the court system if that person does have the legal right to be there or they don't. The biggest problem is that whole court system has taken a long, long time. So that's the biggest problem with this whole system, how it's been set up for so long, is they look at squatters as tenants and that they have all of these rights. I understand that they have the rights for protection, that, it wouldn't be okay for me just to go in and I see somebody in one of my homes and say, you know what, I'm just going to forcibly remove that person because, there's a lot of people that are doing this wrong, but there's also some people that are doing it that don't know that what they're doing is incorrect. So I get the purpose of having those rights of protection so that people don't just take the law into their own hands and go and kick people out that thought that they were actually supposed to be there. So with all of that being said, they've realized that the laws that they have actually gone contrary to what they were meant to do, and they've created loopholes that people have been able to use and manipulate in order to get away with doing things that were wrong. Here in the United States, we care a lot about our stuff. Our stuff, property rights, is a big deal. I mean, if you look at the founding documents of this country, property rights are mentioned multiple times, and it's a very big deal for us to be able to have our stuff and not to think that somebody's just going to be able to come and take it from us. And now to have somebody move into one of our most expensive possessions, our home, and then just say, this is mine and I'm going to live here and you can't really do anything about it. You can go and you can try to take me to court and then I'll do everything that I can to delay that process as long as possible. And as you know, there are some states that favor tenants over landlords or over owners. And so that process can get delayed and delayed and delayed. There are people that have lived unlawfully in somebody else's property for years without paying any rent, and it's been a huge financial burden, if not ruin, to the owner. And to me, that just does not make sense at all. So I am so happy that Ron DeSantis has started this process of saying, you know what, no more squatter rights. If you've come in and you've decided to take up residence in somebody's home that isn't yours, we can go ahead and get them out quickly. So that's why they've started to pass these laws. And so let's take a deeper look into Florida's new anti-squatter law. This new law basically gives homeowners a fast track to be able to get their properties back from squatters. Let me go over some specifics. The general purpose of this bill is to quickly restore possession of residential real property to the lawful owner of the property when the property is being unlawfully occupied, and to thereby preserve property rights while limiting the opportunity for criminal activity. Basically, it speeds up the process of kicking out squatters from a residential home that you own without needing to go through the lengthy legal process of eviction.
What you can do now, if you're the victim of squatting, you can simply fill out a form, give it to your local sheriff, and the sheriff is instructed to go and remove the people who are inhabiting your dwelling illegally. And that will happen very quickly.
The owner or owner's representative submits a form called Complaint to Remove Persons Unlawfully Occupying Residential Real Property, along with government ID and proof of ownership of the home. Once they've given that to the sheriff then goes and verifies that information, and then if that is all true and correct, they will then go to the home and serve notice to immediately vacate the property. But not only that, the sheriff can then arrest and charge people that have unlawfully entered into the property for several things. First, they can charge them with trespassing. If they've caused any damage to the property over $1,000 or more, then they can charge them with a second-degree felony. And if the people living there have warrants or any other crimes that have been committed there, they can charge them with all of those things as well. So this becomes a big deterrent for people wanting to go and break into somebody's home just to live there, because now there are a lot of charges that can quickly come about because of it. And if the squatters have brought anything into the property, the owner or the owner's representative can take any of their belongings and remove it from the home and put it to the property line. And the owner and owner's representative are not liable for any loss or damage to their property. And that is a big win as well, because before in different states, if you were to remove somebody from the property, then you needed to take care of their stuff for a certain time period. Sometimes it was, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and you needed to keep their stuff in good condition so they could come back and retrieve it. But now, according to this law, you can actually just grab their stuff and go put it out on the property line. Now, I don't say go and throw it out there, but you definitely put it out there so they can come back and go through it and get it and take it away or whatever. So now I want to go into a little bit more detail on the form, the Complaint to Remove Persons Unlawfully Occupying Residential Real Property, because this form is really, really important, because it basically says the type of people that you are able to determine are squatters and those that you are not able to determine are squatters. So I'm going to go through each of these aspects with you. So the first thing is the person requesting the squatters to vacate is the owner or the owner's representative, such as a property manager. The second is the property is a residential dwelling. So if you have a commercial building or something of that nature, this doesn't actually apply according to the law. It only applies to residential dwellings. Third, the squatter has unlawfully entered and are trying to remain or reside in the home. So the squatters went in unlawfully, they either broke into the property or figured out a way into the house, and they just decided to take up residence there. Fourth, the property was not open to members of the public at the time the squatters entered into the property. That's interesting. I don't know why that would be in there, but I wonder if that's a big loophole. Like, what if I was in the process of selling my home and I held an open house for people to come in and take a look at the home and everything like that, and I had somebody come in during that time, and let's say there were several people in there, and they were one of the last people in there, and they decide to go and hide in the home somewhere, like in some sort of closet or something, and I'm the realtor, and I start closing up everything, and I leave, and then they come out of this hiding place, and then they invite their whole family and friends and everybody over and have them come and bring all of the stuff and everything like that to start taking up residence. Because technically the property was open to the public, so would that mean that it would be okay to do that? I don't know. That to me sounds like there needs to be a little bit more clarification on that specific part of the law. And then fifth, the owner or owner's representative has asked or told the squatters to leave. Sixth, the squatters are not current or former tenants with a written or oral rental agreement authorized by the property owner. Now, I understand the purpose of this part, and that is because this isn't meant to just forego the whole eviction process. Let's say I was a renter in there for a year and I lost my job and I'm trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and I'm late in paying my rent. There is still an eviction process that happens for renters, people that have had an agreement that are late in their rent or something else has happened and they just haven't paid rent. This law is not meant to supersede the normal eviction that you would do with a tenant that you need to get out of your property. But also I find something very problematic with the wording here. It says the squatters are not current or former tenants with a written or oral rental agreement authorized by the property owner. What if I were to have a friend or neighbor, somebody that's fallen onto hard times and they need a place to stay in, and I have an extra room in my house, and so I tell them verbally, hey, you know what? Why don't you do this? I got an extra room in my house. Why don't you just kind of move in, kind of work on what you need to do in order to get back up on your feet, and you can stay here until you get back up on your feet. That sounds a little bit like an oral agreement that says that you can stay in my property until you get back up on your feet. Well, what if you don't get back up on your feet? Does that mean that you can stay in my property indefinitely because I verbally said you can stay here until you get back up on your feet? I don't know, that seems problematic. I think that there needs to be more clarifying words in there. I think that any actual real lease needs to be done on paper. I don't think that an oral agreement should be looked at as valid as a written agreement. Seventh, the squatters are not family members of the owner. So let's say that your kid is, 18 and they graduated high school or didn't graduate their high school, and then they kind of kept living there, and you're like, all right, son, it's time for you to kind of move on and get on with your life. And they're just like, you know what, this is comfortable. I got food, I got my video games, I just kind of want to stay here. I'm just going to kind of stay here. And they're just there as a bump on a log. You can't enact this law to get them out of your house. You would probably need to go through an eviction process, not just, hey, they're squatting in my house, get them out. And lastly, there is no pending litigation related to the real property between the property owner and any known unauthorized person. So basically what this means is the property in question is not in any lawsuit or anything like that where there are people really disputing the actual ownership. Maybe there's a cousin who thinks that, they should be inheriting grandma's property, and you think, no, I should be inheriting grandma's property. And then they move in and they, make that their residence and say, no, this really should be my property. So I think it's somewhere along those lines, but basically that's the last stipulation on this form in order to be able to give this form to the sheriff in order to have the sheriff help you get these squatters out of the properties. Now, I just need to tell you, I am not a lawyer in any way. And so all I did was I looked at this law to try to understand what it was saying. I shouldn't be interpreting it or anything like that, but this is what I get from reading this law. So because I'm an investor, I'm also really affected by things like this. So I wanted to share this with you and with the investment community so that you can see the steps that are being made in order to help protect property owners. A couple of last things that I want to share really quick. This law did not talk at all about short-term rentals, which can be a big issue because some people might rent a short-term rental for a day or two, and then they decide that they're going to stay there indefinitely until they are evicted, until the law comes and removes them from the house. Now, if you were to look at this law, I don't know if that actually helps homeowners in that situation. Like, for instance, it says that if the property is open to the public and they came and entered into the property when it was open to the public, then they aren't considered squatters. Which means if I advertise to the public, such as on Airbnb or VRBO, that I have a property that people can come in and pay me and stay at, and then they come and they pay for a night or two, and then they just try to stay indefinitely, I don't know if they would be considered squatters or not. So this law needs a little bit more verbiage in order to help protect people that have short-term rentals. Anyway, I just wanted to share the things that I've learned from this, and I'm going to put in the description below the link to this bill so that you can go and look at it yourself and determine for yourself what this looks like. But I really hope that other states follow what Ron DeSantis did in Florida and they start passing laws against squatters. Thanks so much for watching this channel. If you aren't a subscriber, please go ahead, just take a minute, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll do my very best to give you great content on real estate investing and how to build wealth through real estate. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic day.